Mr. Kidnap, can you hear me?
We can, Your Honor.
Okay. I am calling 19 CF 20. It is State versus Jake T. Patterson. Mr. Patterson appears by video conference from the Barron County Jail, along with Attorney Andrew Knack. Also here in the courtroom are his attorneys Richard Jones and Charles Glynn. On behalf of the State District Attorney Brian Wright. Mr. Knack, does Mr. Patterson have a copy of the complaint in front of him?
He does.
Okay. Mr. Patterson, is your name, address, and date of birth correct on the complaint?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Patterson, you are charged in count 1 with on or about October 15, 2018 in Barron County did cause the death of Jayme M. Closs with intent to kill that person contrary to Section 940.01 sub 1 sub A of the Wisconsin statutes, a Class A felony, carrying with it upon conviction shall be imprisoned for life. Count 2 charges on or about on the same date. You did cause the death of Denise J. Closs with intent to kill that person contrary to Section 940.01 sub 1 sub A of the Wisconsin statutes, a Class A felony, and upon conviction shall be imprisoned, sentenced to imprisonment for life. Count 3 charges you on the same date and place by force or threat of imminent force. You did carry JLC from one place to another without that person's consent and with intent to cause the victim to be secretly confined, contrary to Section 940.31 sub 1 sub A of the Wisconsin statutes, a Class C felony carrying with it a maximum penalty of up to a $100,000 fine and or 40 years imprisonment. And count 4 charges you with on or about the same date and place. You did intentionally enter a dwelling without the consent of the person in lawful possession of the place and with intent to commit a felony, to wit, kidnapping while armed with a dangerous weapon, a shotgun, contrary to Section 943.10 sub 2 sub A of the Wisconsin statutes, a Class E felony, carrying with it a maximum penalty of up to a $50,000 fine and up to 15 years imprisonment. Due to the charges here, I'm ordering a DNA sample to be collected, if not already collected, by law enforcement. Mr. Glynn or Mr. Jones, who's answering for defense today regarding preliminary examination?
I will, Your Honor.
Okay, and make sure you use the microphone because I have a digital reporter. Does he wish a preliminary examination?
Yes.
Okay, and is he willing to waive time limits today?
He is willing to waive time limits. We've reviewed that with him previously in person, and he will agree to that.
Okay. Mr. Patterson, are you willing to waive the time limits for a preliminary examination?
Yes, sir.
Did anyone make any threats or promises to get you to waive your right to a preliminary examination?
No.
Excuse me, your time for a preliminary examination, I'm sorry.
No.
And have you had enough time to discuss the waiver of time limits with your attorneys?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And Mr. Glynn, are you satisfied that his waiver is voluntary?
Yes.
I will so find. I've consulted with counsel earlier and found a date that works, February 6th at 11 a.m. Does that still work, Mr. Glynn?
Yes.
And for the state?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Wright, the state's recommendation regarding bail?
State is asking the court to set cash bail in the amount of $5 million. Mr. Patterson has no ties to Barron County. The allegations in the complaint are that he worked at Saputo Cheese Factory for 2 days. The only reason other than that for being in Barron County was to kidnap Jayme. State asks the court to look at the charges themselves. He's charged with 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, maximum sentence on each of those counts, life imprisonment. The count of kidnapping, 40 years, and the count of armed burglary, 15 years. The state asks you to consider the efforts he took to conceal himself as alleged in the criminal complaint, the modifications that he made to his vehicle so that police wouldn't find him, including stealing license plates, on the vehicle near Serona, putting him on his vehicle before he went to the Closs residence so that if police did see him, they would not be able to trace his vehicle back to his plates. The fact that he disengaged his dome light to make sure that no one would be able to see him enter or exit his vehicle. The fact that he purchased a mask. The fact that he wiped down the shotgun that was located at his house and the shells that were used to kill James and Denise by his own words so that no DNA or fingerprints would be found. The fact that it is alleged he shaved his face, all of his head hair, and showered before leaving for the Closs home so no DNA or fingerprints could be located. The fact that he turned his engine off, headlights off to conceal his arrival at the Closs home. The fact that he had made a decision that he was going to shoot anyone inside that home, including children, because he could not leave behind any eyewitnesses. He indicated that if he had been stopped by police, it was likely he was going to shoot at police officers with the 3 shotgun shells that he had remaining. He kept the shotgun shell inside of his house for 2 weeks in case the police came. He remained in hiding after abducting Jayme for 88 days before he was apprehended. Your Honor, all of this indicates the defendant is a flight risk, a danger to the public, and he is unlikely to further return for further court proceedings without an exceedingly high cash bail. The state asks the court to consider Section 969.01 sub 4. Proper considerations for the court to consider in setting bail would include the number and gravity of the offenses, the potential penalty the defendant faces, and whether the alleged acts were violent in nature. All of these factors weigh in favor of the state's requested bail.
Who's arguing bail for the defense?
Your Honor, we would just ask for a lesser amount, make no further argument, and if we'll have any additional things to say about bail, we do it via motion.
The court has reviewed the criminal complaint, almost 12 pages in length. I've considered the allegations as set forth, the possible penalties, which include life imprisonment, and find that substantial cash bail is necessary to ensure the defendant's appearance in court. I will set bail at $5 million. I will see you back in court, Mr. Patterson, on February 6th at 11 a.m. Anything else, Mr. Wright?
Your Honor, if I may address non-monetary conditions.
Yes.
Those would include no possession of firearms, no contact with Jayme Closs, no contact with Peter or Kristen, Kristen, Kasinskas, Kasinskas, or their residence located at 14102 South Eau Claire Acre Circle in Gordon, Wisconsin, and no contact with Jeanne, Jeanne, Nutter, Nutter.
Mr. Glenn, any objection to the non-monetary conditions?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. I'm going to specifically order, Mr. Patterson, that you may not possess any firearms. You may not have contact with Jayme Closs. No contact means no contact in person, by telephone and writing, by electronic means, or causing someone other than your lawyers to have that contact. No contact with Peter or Kristen Kasinskas or their residence at 14102 South Eau Claire. Is that Acres?
Acres, Acres.
Acres Circle, Gordon, or no contact with Jean Nutter. Do you understand that, Mr. Patterson?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Wright?
No, Your Honor.
And anything else, Mr. Glenn?
No, Your Honor.
All right, we're adjourned.
Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian Wright. I'm the Barron County District Attorney. Standing next to me is Douglas County District Attorney Mark Fruhoff. Standing behind me is Assistant District Attorney John O'Boyle. He's an assistant district attorney in my office here in Barron County. Also from my office is Assistant District Attorney John Rafa-Todd from my office, and Assistant Attorney General Annie Jay. This is the prosecution team who will be prosecuting this case. I'd like to thank Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Call for pledging to provide my office with any prosecutorial resources we need in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Today, we start the legal process. That began today by the filing of the criminal complaint and the defendant's initial appearance. It is important to remember that Mr. Patterson retains a presumption of innocence unless and until he is convicted of the charges filed against him. That is why, going forward, my office will not provide additional details about this case while it remains an open case. I ask you to respect the fact that this case will be tried in a court of law. That is why for many of these press conferences, Sheriff Fitzgerald has answered questions that you have had with the answer no comment. That will be even more true now. I know there is public interest in this case. Any scheduled hearings and the trial are open to the public, and so information as to the status of this case will be readily available to all of you and to the public. The prosecution team that you see assembled here today wants justice for James and Denise Closs and for Jayme Closs. I assure you that while you will not receive public statements from my office about this case, the prosecutors who I have introduced and myself will be working hard to convict the defendant of the charges filed against him. At this time, I'm going to open it up for questions,
Will there be any additional charges?
but before I do so, I want to give District Attorney Fruhoff an opportunity to make a statement as well.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I echo the comments of Mr. Wright. Been on the phone with him every day since Jayme was first found alive in our county. My office is still in the process of reviewing the reports on the case to determine whether or not there are any additional charges that would be filed in Douglas County. At this point, I can't provide any additional information about that. I would expect to have an update on that before his next court date as we continue to communicate with Mr. Wright and the victim's family and law enforcement. Thank you.
That
Yes.
answered that. were there any additional charges coming?
Not from Barron County.
But there could be in Gordon County if there was a sex assault?
Douglas
Or
County,
Douglas County?
I think, Mr. Fruhoff.
Yes, Douglas County, there is the potential for additional charges from Douglas County for crimes that occurred in Douglas
Do
County.
you believe crimes occurred in Douglas County?
I can't comment on that at this point, I'm
For
sorry.
88 days, Jayme was gone, and it seems like there are so many more details over that span. Is it safe to say there are more details you still don't have about what happened over those 2.5 months?
Yeah, I'm afraid I can't comment additionally about the facts of the case.
Do you know what his plan was? He had her for 88 days. We know he's accused of all of these charges, but what was his end goal in all of this?
Not beyond what's been stated in the criminal complaint at this time.
Could you step forward with the answers? Sure.
Do we know what he was doing when he left the home the day that Jayme escaped?
I don't have a comment on that at this point.
You know why that was the day she chose to escape? She'd been left for 12 hours at a time other days. Why that day she decided to try to escape?
Again, at this point, I have no comment, but throughout the court proceedings in this case, there will certainly be more information in the various court proceedings, whether those be motion hearings or if we get to the point of a trial.
Have you had a chance to talk to anybody else who might have...
I think you were first,
Have
sir.
you had a chance to talk to anybody else that might have been at the home in Gordon? We heard, according to the documents, his father was there, among other people who might have visited.
I have not spoken to anyone
Can you
else.
talk about the reward? Everyone is wondering, there was that $50,000 reward out. Jayme essentially saved herself. Is Barron County going to defer that money?
That's a question for someone else other than me.
If this goes to trial, is there any chance this might be moved out of Barron County?
That would be determined by motions. I'm not aware of any motions yet having been filed, but that would be dealt with at a later time.
In the criminal complaint, it says that he told detectives that he did this, he committed these crimes. How does that play into your case? You say that he's presumed innocent until proven guilty.
There is a process that will take place at the right time. We will present our evidence, and we will argue why the evidence shows beyond a reasonable doubt that he did it.
Is there a signed confession?
I'm not going to answer that at this point. I can tell you that the criminal complaint lays out information that he provided to law enforcement officers.
Have you been able to gather additional details beyond the criminal complaint that would indicate why he did this?
That's not a question that I'm prepared to answer at this time. I will again tell you there is additional information that is not contained in the criminal complaint.
How did he know exactly where she lived?
That's stated in the criminal complaint. He was driving, I believe it was either to or home from work, saw a school bus, saw her, and had made the decision at that point that he was going to take her.
And he watched her go from the school bus into her home.
I don't think that's specifically stated in the criminal complaint, but that's where he observed her.
Is this every parent's worst nightmare?
I think most of us here, if not, were parents, and it certainly is something that gives us all pause.
Has he shown any remorse?
I have seen him for the first time today in court.
When did he see her get on that school bus? The criminal complaint doesn't say that. How long had he been, for lack of a better term, targeting her, I guess?
Again, I'm not prepared to answer that at this time.
How important is it for you to get a conviction in this case, given the national media scope of everything here?
It's extremely important. It's extremely important because we are seeking justice. We have two parents of a 13-year-old who are deceased. We have a 13-year-old who was abducted for 88 days against her will forcibly. It doesn't get any more serious than that. And I assure you that these prosecutors here, all of us, want justice for both James and Denise and for Jayme.
Do you know how much time there was between when he saw her on the bus and when he actually acted?
Again, I'm not going to answer specific factual information beyond what was stated in the criminal complaint at this time.
Listed in the criminal complaint?
Criminal complaint establishes probable cause for the charges that have been filed.
In the criminal complaint, there's no mention of any potential molestation. Other than it didn't happen or leaving that out.
Again, no comment on that at this time.
Sir, could you tell me about the gathering of evidence at the scene? Have you, as the Barron County Sheriff, done a good job at this point from what you can see, or is there any mistakes or any concerns that you have of the gathering of evidence in this case?
law enforcement work, and that includes Barron County Sheriff's Department as well as other law enforcement agencies. As I indicated at an earlier press conference, there were hundreds of officers who assisted. The work that they have done has been incredible. And that, I believe, with all of my heart, is one of the reasons that this all came together the way it did for Jayme to now be safely home. If you think about it, the fact that a stranger would have recognized Jayme, that was because of the work of law enforcement. The fact that Douglas County deputies acted so quickly was again because of the work of all of the law enforcement officers who had involvement in this case. I can't speak highly enough of the work they did. Jayme deserves enormous credit as a 13-year-old, and she has such bravery to have done what she had done. But there were many, many others as well that if all those pieces had not fallen into place on that particular afternoon, the outcome could have been very different.
Sir, the criminal complaint basically sounds like the deputy actually witnessed Patterson's vehicle exiting the crime scene or on the road coming away from the crime scene. Why were we not told about that vehicle, and was that need thoroughly investigated?
Again, I think you had prior interviews with Sheriff Fitzgerald, and I believe he felt that was information that should not be disclosed at the time. We're now in the process of proceeding with the prosecution, so it was the appropriate time to release that information.
If this goes to trial, are you going to have Jayme testify?
That's a decision that will be made much later than today. At this point, we have no intention of having her have to testify at any proceedings coming up.
You had mentioned that there may be more information coming out of Douglas County. Do you have a timeline for when you are hoping to release more information?
I would anticipate having more information on that before his next court date in February.
How are the deputies doing who've been investigating this case?
I'm sorry, any? No.
Will you consider having him undergo a mental health evaluation?
Again, that would be done through motions, and no motions asking for that have been filed at this time.
If he remains in jail, will he be allowed to have visitors?
That's a jail policy. I don't have an answer for you.
How are the deputies who have been investigating this case doing, especially the ones who responded to that initial scene?
I think they're doing fine. As you can tell from the criminal complaint, it was a gruesome scene, but they're trained. I think many of them have had experiences. So it's not an easy job, we all know that, but they're doing fine.
What about the visitors that went to Patterson's home? Did they have any inkling that something was off?
Again, I have no information to give you other than what I've stated in the criminal complaint about that.
Have you interviewed other people besides the people that are cited in the criminal complaint about Patterson or maybe his motives?
No,
Do you plan on?
I haven't. I'm sure law enforcement has.
It sounds as if this was random. Do you know a motive yet, or are you still trying to find that out?
At this time, I'm going to leave it to what's in the criminal complaint. Again, there is more information that will come out as the proceedings continue.
Can you talk about Jayme as a witness, and are you going to have to talk to her further interviews down the road to get more information? In that first night, when she was in the hospital in Duluth, how much information did she just have a lot of details and just kept on talking? Or?
Again, no one here was present for that. That was law enforcement. That was victim witness coordinators and advocates. And so I've seen Jayme in terms of the photographs and the stories about her. She just seems like an incredible young woman, but I have not yet met her.
Can you expand on Jayme's escape? Did she have to break out of the home, or did she let herself out of the door? Or
The criminal complaint indicates that she was able to push herself out from under the bed and that she put on Patterson's shoes. They were on the wrong feet, but she was able, then she walked out the front door and saw Ms. Hutter, and at that point made the statements that she was in need of help.
It says that she left after he had left. Was it immediate? Did she wait a couple hours? Do we know how quickly she tried to escape upon him going where he needed to go?
Again, I'm going to stay with the information in the complaint for now.
The criminal complaint says that Jayme had told detectives that Patterson's dad would often visit on Saturdays. Are you all going to be talking to any of his family, including his dad, who was in that house, according to Jayme?
Again, I don't know what the status of the law enforcement investigation is at this point. That would be a question for them.
Patterson had a number of people visit the house while Jayme was there. Is there any indication that those people assisted in this crime in any shape, way, or form, or do you still believe that Patterson acted alone?
At this point, we've charged based on the information in the reports that I have received. We've charged what we believe happened. So the answer to that is no. All right. Any other questions? Why don't we take two more? If there are no other questions, thank you all. Yes.
Is this the best outcome to hope for, given the circumstances of everything that's happened?
Yes, and as I indicated, everything had to fall into place that afternoon for it to have happened. 10 minutes either way on either side. I just, it doesn't take much imagination to figure out what likely would have been the result. So, yes, best case outcome. We're so grateful for Jayme and her safe return. And now it's time for us to obtain justice for her and for her parents.
What does it say about Jayme's bravery or courage to be able to do something like this after nearly 3 months of captivity?
Unbelievable. She's 13 years old. And if you read the criminal complaint, you can see the amount of control that he was exerting over her. And at some point, she found it within herself at 13 years old to say, I'm going to get myself out of this situation. I think it's incredible.
Prosecutor, any idea why he did this? We understand the details that he told us with the criminal complaint. What was the motivation? Why this control over this young girl? Why did he do it?
Again, I'm not going to speak beyond the information in the complaint at this point. There is more information that, as we proceed, that will be made available, whether it's through these court proceedings and the motions that we have, or if we have a trial, the trial itself. So there's more, but at this point I'm going to rely on what's in the complaint and limit my remarks to that. I think it gives a pretty good explanation for what occurred, why we filed the charges we did, and we'll proceed from there with further proceedings in the case.
Do you believe this is going to trial?
At this point, we have every reason to believe it will go to trial, yes.
Sir, did he explain why he was so eager to confess every detail?
Again, let me say we're probably getting late for everyone. We'll do that question and one more. I don't want to go beyond what's in the criminal complaint.
Does the outcome of this case give us more hope for missing children cases going forward?
Yes.
Why? Okay, go ahead. That's enough.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, no, Brian. Thank you. You're probably something.